So if you thought men and women were equally likely to die, if you thought the young were dying equally, if you thought, well, rich people, they're dying just like poor people. And remember, I did say connectedness or connectivity. Single people are dying. Gupta said, a depressingly consistent profile. It's like almost all of the deaths were like this. There are hardly any exceptions. But we only hear about the exceptions. Why sell equal opportunity? Why make that claim? Well, it's another way of saying that drugs cause addiction. Remember, the first thing we did? Opioids make you addicted. Except opioids didn't make you addicted. That's an idea. It's a fundamental idea. It's a very important idea that doesn't have any basis in your experience, but which we like to sell for some reason. And if you want to sell that idea, you can't say different people are more likely to die, can you? What you experience, that can't be true. That has to be denied. So you have to say, well, everybody's equally likely to die. And then we can attack drugs. Because what are you going to do about a single, solitary, uneducated man in West Virginia? And what are you going to do about an inner city black ghetto? What's to be done about that? Well, that's complicated, isn't it? As Pauline's slides show, how many things have to be done. But I have an even more depressing answer to give you. We sort of don't care about these people, really. We only care, if one person out of 10,000 from a middle-class background dies, well, we care about him. They made a movie called Beautiful Child about a kid who became addicted to meth. He didn't die. In fact, he's now a writer about addiction. His father is a well-known writer. They're not going to make a movie about some person in Appalachia who dies of an overdose. Who's going to go to that stupid movie? They're going to make a movie about a well-off kid from a rich family. And then we can all say, oh my God, I hope that doesn't happen to me. Because they're the ones we care about. I've been going through myths here, perhaps. Drugs cause addiction. But is this a drug problem? Those guys in that Appalachia dying? You know, they also are more likely to die of cirrhosis. They're also more likely to commit suicide. That's the one group of white people in America whose life expectancy is declining. There's already a big gap between white and black life expectancy. So addiction isn't about the thing. It's about an experience that comes from a thing or an involvement. It involves the person and it involves their situation. And I'll just give you some quick research references. We had an experiment with heroin addiction that we called the Vietnam War. We sent a lot of young men to Vietnam. About 50% of them became addicted to heroin there. And then they came back to the United States, and 95% of them stopped being addicted, even though 50% of them took a narcotic when they got home. And all of the medical experts said, this defies everything we ever knew about addiction, which is once a person becomes addicted to a drug, they become perpetually addicted. That's their nature. But if you knew nothing about theories of addiction, if somebody said, well, some young men went away from home to Vietnam, they were frightened for their lives, they were separated from their families. In that case, many men became addicted to heroin, then they came home and they stopped being addicted. You'd all say, well, of course, stupid. Is that the most commonsensical thing there could be? Rat Park is an experiment by a friend of mine named Bruce Alexander. You know, you can get an animal addicted in a cage. They'll repeatedly take a narcotic. So here's the whole darn experiment. They built a bigger place for the rats where they could run around and have a Ferris wheel, and they could have I don't know how to put it, but there were men rats and female rats. Do you kind of get where I'm going? And all of the rats stopped taking the narcotic. So what does that sign? Sex is a more powerful motivator than narcotics and withdrawal. So we could have all kinds of slides here about sex addiction, couldn't we? And yet we expect most people not to become addicted to sex, even though nearly everybody has it. Isn't that amazing? Rats prefer sex to morphine even when they've been habituated to morphine. So I've been talking about an idea here. The idea that the United States is selling the world, and which you have somewhat bought, is that we're going to solve addiction medically. What's that mean? That we're going to find an area and not one person in the world is diagnosed for addiction by an MRI. They don't bring you in, give you an MRI and say, oh, he's addicted. They say you're addicted because why do they say you're addicted? The lady there nodding her head, blonde hair. Why do they say you're addicted? Hello, my name's Stanton Peele. How do they decide somebody's addicted? Well, they compulsively use it, and what happens to their lives? What happens to their lives? Guy with the glasses here. How do we decide people are addicted? By clinical standards. How do we decide people have a substance use disorder? It becomes the number one priority, and it screws up the rest of their life. Bad things happen to them. That's how they come to us. If bad things don't happen to them, they don't come to us. And they're promising that they're going to solve this with a medical solution. The endorphins were discovered in the late 60s, and they began to announce that we almost had solved mental illness, addiction, and dealing with pain. How's it been going since then, would you say?